All right, and so before we go into actually dealing with the topic of Balividhan, I specifically chose Balividhan because that's the term that's used a lot in Shakti Tantras and other places. Basically, when we are talking about how exactly the ritual of Bali is done, so it's a vidhan. Vidhan means it's like something that has been fated to happen. It's a dictate from the divine that this is how it is to be done. This is done. So it's not a question of arguments. Should I do it? Not do it. So all that has already been passed. And once the stage of Bali comes in, so it becomes a vidhan, Bali vidhan. But before we go into that, we need to first understand some basic things with respect to how dharma works in general, and how is it different from to contrast it from the Abrahamic thinking and approach to religion and other things, because this is one of the key aspects. And I believe that unfortunately, a lot of people are unaware of certain fundamentals in this regard. And because of this, and I'm saying well-meaning people, they're not malicious people, and those who are filled with hatred for Hinduism. No, I'm just talking even average common Hindus. So because we are not exactly given the right kind of teaching and grounding, as we grow up for various factors and all that, so we don't understand certain key differences. So in any system that has worship of multiple devatas, so whether you call it, whether you choose to call it polytheism, whether you choose to call it some other term, it doesn't matter. Fundamentally, the idea is, so there are different streams and there are multiple divine beings, deities, devatas we have. Each one of the devata has his or her own peculiar nature, own personality, own likes, dislikes, and things like that. And beyond the devatas, there is also uh, the concept of, if you go to the Upanishadic philosophies and all that, there is something, the Brahman, or the ultimate substratum reality, or something very vast. But or the Atman, for example, you would see that very rarely, almost never in the history of Dharma, has any rishi, any saint, anybody created a temple for the Atma or the Brahman, because it is something that is very neutral to everything. Its existence is so that is sort of, in a basic common understanding, that is sort of the highest divine platform that you can imagine. And it is extremely unbiased, and not only unbiased, it has got no sort of, how would I put it, it has no preferences about this and that. So it does not care. For the Brahman's perspective, it does not matter whether you're doing this or you're doing that, or you're going to the temple, you're not going to the temple. So who actually worships those, that highest realm of reality, that is the, in general, idea was that the sannyasis do that. So those who have all passed to the Grihastha ashrama and the other ashramas, and they go to the sannyas ashrama, and then they decide that we need to worship the Brahman, because we need that perspective of the Brahman, that absolutely unattached to anything, that kind of a perspective. So that is wonderful. But there are other things also involved in dharma, and those are equally important. So you can't just jump into that right on day one. Number one point. And number two, perhaps it is not even necessary for everybody to do that worship also. So that's one stream. Now, the reason I say this is because uh, people have this generic idea of, I am worshipping God, which is a term that comes from in the English language, and perhaps that has strong connotations from the Abrahamic tradition. So there is one central being that has certain powers and abilities, and that creates and things like that. So this conception has become widespread even among Hindus also. It's not that we never had any conception of this kind of a central being, but its role was much more nuanced and complex and sophisticated, to put in the word, than what we have in the Abrahamic idea. So we have the idea of the Ishvara. Now, Ishvara can be, from the Vaishnava perspective, Ishvara is a form of Vishnu. From the Shaiva perspective, Ishvara is Shiva himself. So like this. Or if you're looking from the Shakta perspective, it is Ishwari, the goddess, who becomes the ultimate and the creator of everything. Whatever be the case, whichever deity is elevated to the status of the Ishvara for the devotees, whenever you are approaching that deity for your sadhana, for your upasana, for anything else for that matter, you have to remember that there are two aspects to this. One is that there's a universality because that being is now looked at as an Ishvara, which means that is the, for common understanding, he's God with a capital G. But also, if you are worshipping Shiva or if you're worshipping Vishnu, there are certain specific traits, characteristics, likes, dislikes, and sort of personalities that that being has, which is important to remember in case you want to succeed in the worship of that devata. Now, this concept is very, very crucial to dharma. That's because without that, you will not understand why a ritual exists in the first place. So we have, so contrasting this to, for example, in an Abrahamic religion, you can worship God. All you need is that you just need a maybe a a football field or a hall, and you just need a place of congregation, and there are 50 or 100 people getting together and chanting something or whatever. That's one way of looking at their the way they connect to the divine. Our system is slightly different for that, which means suppose you have to worship Shiva, then you have to follow the rituals that are necessary in order that the devata is pleased by those rituals. So Shiva requires abhishekam that has to be done. You have to offer the Bel Patra to Shivalinga that has been consecrated. Then you have to offer, abhishekam with the various ingredients, whether it's milk, whether it's ghee, whether it's water, if nothing else is available, etc. Similarly, if you're worshipping Vishnu, then you have to offer tulsi. So these things are certain non-negotiables. These are things that were not created by you, me, or any other average Hindu. These were done by the great masters of the religion, masters of dharma, the rishis, who by their great tapasya had experienced these things, and they found out, okay, this is the way to approach this deity. These are the things he or she likes. So if I give these offerings to him, there's a greater chance that I will succeed. So, very naive question comes in, and I've seen many Hindus, specifically, the more armchair pandit kind of Hindus who may not have practiced a lot but read too many things. So they put in the question, ki, what is going to happen if I offer Tulsi to Shiva? Nothing is going to happen except your sadhana will not succeed. So this is the whole point. You are doing something because there is a tangible effect you will feel from that, and that also is described in the Shastras. None of it is like made up by somebody, some fantasy that's cooked up. No, the Shastras right from step one, how you are worshipping X Y Z, you are doing following this ritual, etc. And they will tell you that okay, if you carry on this way, this method of worship of this deity, there's a high chance that X Y Z results will come in given time in the future, etc. So all these will tell you, these are indicators that how far you are able to succeed, how far the upasana is working. So in that sense, if you were to offer something that is, let's say that is not something that's liked by the deity, if the deity is of a mild nature, Somya Devata, which we call it, he or she may not react to it, but he or she is unlikely to give you the result of the upasana that you do. Whereas in the case of certain more fierce forms of the deity, you may even have a certain a reaction, to put it mildly, if you do not follow the dictates and the basic fundamental rules that are given for the upasana of that deity. So this is how this logic is to be clearly understood, because this is how whole of the whole system of rituals, the whole system of upasana has been designed in dharma based on this. When you are approaching a devata, when you are worshipping a devata, in fact, there is not one stream of uh, spiritual of dharma. Dharma has many streams, whether it's this yoga, bhakti yoga, kriya yoga, or tantra sadhana, or Vedic mark, or whether you are doing Puranic upasana, etc. Worship of deities stands at the very fulcrum of it all. Every path, somewhere or the other, you will have some upasana of some devata. It is there. There is no question of absolutely we don't worship any deity. That's almost non-existent. Everywhere, even in the forms, even in places where there is very mild, involvement of deity upasana, still there will be, you'll find one or two names. And the moment you have a name, moment you say Shiva, moment you say Vishnu, moment you say Kali, the moment you have a name, there is also a form involved. The moment you have a form, you will have a method to approach that form, that path. That is very important. Another aspect that comes in, and this also sort of little naively believed by some people, that if I just have pure bhakti, why do I need to do these things? But that's because bhakti is never pure. That's like you are self-certifying that you have pure bhakti, but who has tested? If your bhakti were that pure, you just have to name the deity, and the deity will present itself himself herself before you. So that has not happened, which means that your bhakti, your gyan, your karma, everything is mixed. It's not at the highest possible state, where which is sufficient to bring the deity to you, in contact with you. So this is understood as the general condition of humanity. I mean, one or two exceptions may be there. Somebody who's, after some saint may be born somewhere. We are not talking about that. We're talking about ordinary people like us. So for us, uh, all of these attributes, whether it's bhakti, whether it's gyan, whether it's karma, whether it's rituals, all of them are imperfect at day one. And because it is imperfect, that is why you will need to supplement your bhakti along with upasana, along with rituals, along with other things which are mandated in the texts. Only then you have a chance that the deity is going to respond to you in a favorable manner. Now, uh, with this background in set, we come to the specific point of Bali or animal sacrifice that is there. In fact, before going to animal sacrifice, the concept of sacrifice is fundamental to any ritual, dharma. Uh, Whether we find Bali as a system very much prevalent in the Vedic texts. In fact, perhaps a larger number of Vedic commentators and some of the top acharyas, they mention this categorically, that while uh, one may choose to be so as a lifestyle choice, let's say that many of the texts did preference sort of did recommend that if you have a vegetarian lifestyle, it's slightly better. It's not compulsory, but it's sort of better. But the same text will tell you, for example, that when a bali has to be given in a ritual, you do not confuse this with your normal, I need to eat this food and that food, and that logic does not apply here at all. Because this is something which is mandated by the requirements of the ritual for that deity. If a deity, to put it in other words, if a deity needs a bali for that deity to be satisfied, for deity to respond favorably, then it has to be given. That's not a question of negotiating, should I do it, should I not do it. It doesn't work that way. So this was the original idea. In fact, this idea was so largely well integrated into a thought process that we have even a text, a Vedantic text of such great respect and reverence as the Brahma Sutras. They contain a verse inside which says that when it comes to sacrifices done for the various Vedic yagyas, the larger yagyas, some of them require sacrifices for animals, not all request. So that should not be taken as himsa. That should not be taken as something, as a violent act or anything, because by the act of, and this verse is just symptomatic of the various kinds of verses you'll find across Vedic literature, which sort of tell you that the thrust was when sacrifice has to be given, it has to be given. And why it has to be given? That is because that sacrifice is not considered to be himsa, that is not violence. That is not violence at all. Why? That is because when the Vedic mantras or the mantras are done and does as per the ritual mandated for that particular, in that context, it is the responsibility of the deity, what he does, whatever the deity you are approaching. So that deity takes up the soul of that animal that is being sacrificed and gives it a higher rebirth, or takes it to some other loka that is more favorable for its existence. Because remember that we do not consider death as the end of the story. So there is no, unlike other religions and all that, it's not about just one lifetime. You have a lifetime, you'll have another lifetime, you'll have more opportunities. So your karmas are such that it is going to determine what kind of lifetime you are going to get next time, or in consequent times. So it was considered this, that whenever there is a deity, a sacrifice that is done in the case of a correctly done ritual, it is the deity who takes up the soul of that animal that is being sacrificed, of the pashu, and then liberates it from the pashu yoni and puts it at a higher yoni where it can enjoy greater degree of freedom and greater degree of choices, plus many other things. So in short, basically, it's like a lift to a higher condition that happens, and it is done by the power of the deity. It's the deity who does it, because humans can't do this if the deity is satisfied. Over time, what happened, there was also, meanwhile, there were also various currents that were going on in India, and there were religions and other things, etc., and there were debates, counter debates, etc. All that ended up with the thrust on sacrifice in the Vedic rituals sort of coming down, to the extent that there were later day acharyas who said that, let's not, once the lifestyle became sort of properly vegetarian in the ritual aspect. Some of the acharyas, they were all great men, but they decided that let's change the bali in the Vedic ritual to, instead of an actual animal, we'll take something made of a floor, and we will do prana pratishtapana of the animal on that floor, and then we will do a sacrifice of that, thing that is made out of floor. So this is basically a kind of a mock sacrifice. So you are still doing prana pratishtapana, by the way. It's not that you are just, taking something and sacrificing it. The the fundamental understanding you have to see here is that, so nobody was ever able to completely give up the concept of bali. So what you're doing in the Vedic system, what happened later on was that you are, instead of sacrificing the animal, you are actually taking something with your hands, you are making it shaped like an animal with some flour and add some water and things like that. And then you're doing prana pratishtapana of the animal inside it, and then you are sacrificing. So it's a very roundabout way of fulfilling the condition of the ritual. Instead of doing what the ritual originally mandated, that, in XYZ ritual, there has to be a sacrifice like that. Now, today, Pashubali exists in a very small number of places. Then that too, mostly either it's in the Tantric Upasana. It exists in Tantric temples, few of them. Even there also, leaving aside some like Kamakhya and Tarapit and other places, some other Devi temples, Tantric Devi temples, sacrifices happen, but they don't happen too publicly because of it can cause outrage among some people. So that's why, which is, in my opinion, very unfortunate. So this sacrifice bali of animals when it comes to Shakta Tantra is absolutely mandated. It is not even a question of, so as we're coming back to the earlier point that I was making about ritual specification. So we have texts here, we have stotras of the goddess, which make it abundantly clear that a certain degree of result is not going to come unless you are going to offer a sacrifice to the goddess. And that is why there are stotras, for example, of certain Mahavidyas, which mention them as Bali Homa Priya, which means that they love Bali and they love Homas when they're done with them. Okay, even some things which has been so cardinal to the Shakta, like the Devi Mahatyam or any other text you pick up, there will always be some or the other reference to how the deity loves, specifically Devi, Bhagavati. She loves the act of sacrifice, and why it is something that brings great delight to the goddess. So this is not a question of whether you like it. Remember, the upasana, when you're doing the upasana, when you're doing the ritual, it's not about your liking or disliking. It's about what is it that the deity likes. That's what you have to do. That's how it has been designed. That's what gives the best results. In fact, even in this, even in the tantric system also, Bali is so important that those who there are a school of tantra which is the Dakshinachara tantra. Dakshinachara means you do it without using any of the five ritual ingredients of that's used in Vamachara, where Bali is also important. So instead of that, they give Bali, but they give Bali of specific vegetarian ingredients. So that is also mandated. So in fact, a text like the Kaligapuran will have details of the various kinds of balis of animals that you can give, plus various types of vegetables that you can give as bali. So there are certain cases where sugarcane can be given as a bali, certain kinds of goats can be given as a bali. So various things like that. And here too, because it's a ritual, so the vegetable that is to be offered as a bali is also very specific. So you cannot just pick up randomly anything. I like an apple, so let me just give an apple as a bali. No, it's not. You need to have that specific thing and then give the bali. This is point number one. Second thing that happens is that in traditionally done, where bali is traditionally done, I use the word traditional because there are places in India where the grama devatas also bali is given, but very often it is not done as per the sort of the full ritual mandating of things. It's more of folk practices. So I'm not criticizing them or anything. It's the way it is. Whereas when Pashu Bali is to be done in a absolutely formal way, in the tantric way, so that animal has to be first worshipped, the kharga has to be worshipped. Not everybody can give a bali, by the way. Those who have the capacity to do the bali, and the kharga through which the bali is to be done is considered as representative of the divine mother. So it has to be worshipped with certain mantras. The animal is worshipped with certain mantras. The deity is worshipped, invoked. That okay, we are giving. We have to take a sankalpa for that. You cannot just just take an animal and give a bali. No, you have to take a sankalpa, just like any puja. That start with desh kal patra. This is this and this. So and so individual. This is your gotra, etc. And I'm giving XYZ Bali to XYZ deity for XYZ purpose, whatever. If there's no specific, manokamana, then you can just say for the pleasure of the deity, something like that. So after the sankalpa is done, then the animal is given a ritual bath, the animal is worshipped, the kharga is worshipped, and then the bali is done, and it has to be done in one shot. So it cannot also be ideal case. It cannot be, you cannot. So basically, you cannot do halal and all that. It has to be the removal of the head of the animal has to be done in one clean shot. And then, in more complicated worships of which require bali, the blood that comes out from that animal is actually collected before it hits the ground in a container. It's taken up in a container, and then it's taken inside and offered to the deity with certain mantras and mudras. So all these things are there, and there. This is part of the ritual. This is all done in a very ritualistic manner. So it's not something like this is a misconception that many people tend to have often, especially those who are outside of the fold. So they believe that you're giving bali because you want to eat non-vegetarian food. No, it's got nothing to do with that. It's in fact, I have seen people who are vegetarians in their life, in their personal lifestyle. Even they had to give bali when certain rituals had to be performed for certain deities. Yes, after the bali is done, then that meat becomes prasad. So whoever consumes that prasad can take it. In fact, we find a reference to Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was a Kali Upasak, perhaps one of the greatest Kali Upasaks ever. So, in the Kali temple where I used to stay, their balis used to happen quite often. And balis was like standard practice in Kali Puja, Tantric Puja of Kali. Bali has to be given in certain tithis and all that. Later towards his life, Ramakrishna himself lost, because of his practices, he went to such a high state that he lost appetite for any food, not just non-vegetarian. Even vegetarian food used to eat very less, like minimum amount of food used to eat. So during that condition, when a bali was given and the prasad from that bali, the meat, etc., was offered to him, so he would not consume the prasad because his food intake had reduced drastically. It was intense spiritual practices, but he would still take that plate of food prasad and put it in his head and do a namaskara to it, and just take one small, not even a morsel, just touch his finger there and put it in his tongue as a act of reverence, because this has now become a prasad that is sanctified by the deity, and then give it off. So the idea that bali is given because it somehow satisfies the palate is a wrong way of approaching that. I mean, as I mentioned, there are balis that are given for vegetarian options also. So it's not that you can skip the bali part. If you have to do the puja in the tantrokta manner, and not just tantrokta, in fact, let's put it this way: to worship the Bhagavati, the various forms of the Bhagavati, and to worship, let's put it, the Mahavidyas, especially the more ugra forms of the Mahavidya, whether it's Kali, whether it's Tara, whether it's Chinnamasta, etc., etc. Balividhan becomes very important after a point. It's not, the deity loves Bali, and you will have to give a Bali. Yeah, you may give a vegetarian alternative if that's what your aim is, or you may give a Pashu Bali if that's what your aim is. Both of them are valid, both of them are acceptable. But it is not that you can skip the concept of Bali in Shakti Puja. Does not happen. In fact, in certain texts, they will tell you that there are certain deities who are Bali devatas, which means that they love the act of Bali. And until a Bali is offered to them, the Upasana is not, it doesn't matter how much you're doing the sadhana and the ritual and all that, it is not fulfilled. In certain cases, and this is the most amazing thing, most average people perhaps will never have seen a thing like this. If your sadhana goes to a very high state of intensity, And I've seen this happening in few instances when I had the extreme good fortune of observing very powerful upasakas. They're private people, not famous and anything. The animal on its own will appear at that area where the ritual is being conducted. Animal which is to be sacrificed. And this is the most amazing thing. I've seen that myself. The, the ritual has been conducted in a sort of semi-isolated area where there are not too many people, where the Upasaka himself is there and perhaps one or two of his, helpers and things like that. And once it reaches a certain peak, and the energy that is being generated by the sadhana reaches a certain peak, at that time, a specific animal will appear there, and that animal may even have signs on his body. There are certain lakshanas on the body of an animal which indicate this animal is meant to eventually die through a Bali ritual. Whether it's conducted here, now, today, to this place or that place, that's secondary, but that's how it will end, sort of. So these things can happen. It's not uncommon. In fact, another instance I knew, um, of a very high caliber upasak, very extremely high caliber upasak of a Dakshinachara Sampradaya. So Dakshinachara means they don't do Bali, and means they don't do Pashu Bali. They do Anukalpa. They do use Anukalpas, which are like substitutes from the actual ingredient that is mentioned in the tantras. Uh, he was worshipping. He was a very high caliber upasak, extremely capable, and he was worshipping a very ugra form of a ugra form of Devi. I won't name the form here. His intensity of the sadhana had reached a tremendous peak. Like 6 months, he had been doing hours and hours at night. He used to sit and do the ritual and the japa, for continuously. And then eventually the deity started appearing to him in dreams first initially. And the first thing that the deity asked him, and this was a very aggressive form, very, very powerful, quite popular among in certain circles. And the first thing that the deity asked him was that, so where is my sacrifice? Okay, you have called me, so you have to now give a bali. Initially, he tried to resist that for some months, but then this is the other thing. Once you're capable enough to call a deity to yourself, then after that, there is no backtracking that, okay, no galti ho gaya, mujhe abhi nahi karna. That doesn't work. So you have to follow. It's like inviting a tiger into your home and then saying that, oh, okay, I don't know what to do. So that's kind of stupid. So he then approached his own guru, who was also very high up, and said that this XYZ is happening. So what should I do? And the guru said that, okay, abhi to, there's nothing you can do about this at this moment. So you just quietly go there to Kamakhya, and there you give a sacrifice and you come back. So he had to go there. He gave a sacrifice to this specific deity, and for that, basically, you take a sankalpa that, okay, this is done for XYZ deity and all that, and he came back. And eventually, that man went up to become a very good, very exceptional Siddha Purusha of this form of the deity. Though in public, he would put up this, he had this, in the community that he lived, there was this completely Dakshinachara community. So he used to have this very sattvic vegetarian lifestyle and all that. But occasionally, for the purpose of upasana, for the purpose of the pleasure of the deity, he still used to go once in a while, alone, of course, not with too much fanfare, to Kamakhya, which is one of the biggest Bali Pitas we have in India at this moment, and offer a Bali to the Devata and come back. You'd not consume the meat or anything of that sort, but you'd still go there and give it. Because this is the way things are. If you approach certain deities, and also remember, the Hindus, our rishis are so fantastic, they have given all kinds of deities for us to worship. You have the very ugra forms, you have the more somya forms. There are deities for whom you can just give you can make a kheer that is good enough, and there are deities for whom you have to give bali. So it depends on your choice that you want to worship this deity or not, and what degree of worship you want to involve yourself in. That is also important. So a little bit of going to the temple, doing some bhakti, reading a few stotras, that is fine. Now, if if you decide that no, I want something more than that, in the sense I want to, um, let's just say I want to attain siddhi of the deity, which is one notch higher, not just one notch, multiple notches higher than the average puja that people do. Then there are many other. Then the requirements become very strict. That certain deities are there. Without offering a bali, you will never even be able to reach anywhere close to the deity. That's like not going to work in the first place. Another aspect of Bali that is important. Now, I mentioned that there are texts will tell you that there are vegetarian options that are given and there are non-vegetarian options, like Pashu Bali also mentioned. In this, the Kaligapuran specifically mentions a specific sloka, which paraphrased comes to something like this. When you want a result that is internalized, so you want a higher state in your meditation, in the mantra sadhana that you're doing, that time you can offer a bali that is a vegetarian bali, which means you can offer a sugar cane. In some places I've seen even Jaifal is offered as a bali, by the way, in some cases. So there are different options. Some part of it comes from the text and part of it comes from the tradition that follows that specific vidhan of bali. So when a when a vegetarian option is offered as a bali, and if the ritual is correctly done and everything else is correctly done, so that can help the upasaka to internalize and attain a slightly deeper state of sadhana, one way. Whereas when a pashu bali is offered, that is also a projection of power in the external world. And remember this, of all the paths, all the different sampradayas, all the different approaches to sadhana, the path of Tantra and the path of Shakti Upasana makes it very clear right from the beginning that not only there has to be power internalized, which means internalized power means, suppose you can cut off from the world and you can go into samadhi for hours and sit and feel very blissful. That's wonderful, very good for you. But tantras are clear, that's not good enough. Your power has to also apply in the world outside where you live. It is the field of action. It is where you will be, where you can understand if the power is working or not. And that applies not just for Bali, by the way, that applies for other rituals also. So certain mantras you do, if you keep chanting those Shakta mantras, you will, whether the mantra is working or not, you will understand also there are signs, nimittas that will happen outside you in the world around you. In your limited universe, in your interaction with people, you will see certain things, certain effects that it will cause, and that will give you a clue that whether your sadhana is going well, whether you need to go deeper, things like that, etc. So tantras are very clear that power is important because power is a manifestation of the goddess. It is she herself who becomes power, all power in the world. Okay, and this power has to be both internal, because internal it will help you into getting into deeper states, and also external, because in any case, if you're living a life, you might as well live like a sort of somebody who has some control over what you're doing. There, and this is, by the way, even without tantra sadhana also. If you look at it this way, we pass school, college, then go to office. We have friends, things like that. So in office, you meet somebody. Some may be your friends, some may be your enemies. Some people like you, some dislike you, etc. So there is always going to be an average interaction of love and hate with the world that is always going on with you, regardless of whether you are religious or secular. So in that situation, tantras say that, so there's a struggle that is always going on. You cannot deny it. I mean, nobody, unless you've reached the final stage where nothing matters, or you are a dead body. These are the two options. Anything else in between, you will always interact with the world with a certain degree of whether there is uh, you know a necessity to win. Let's put it this way: a necessity where there is multiple forces acting, and you will have your energy, your mind, your will, your kriyas, etc. And you would like yourself to triumph in that situation. Everybody does that. We are organically designed that way. So Tantra says that if that is the case, you might as well use the processes which can maximize your chance of attaining the success that you think of. Okay. Well, there are of course multiple factors that come into play, and it's not necessary that always you will succeed. But at least it helps you gives a certain greater advantage. So there is no. So bottom line is that there are certain paths which tell you that your aim in life is to be completely detached from everything. That's yes, that is true. That's good. It's wonderful. But if you read the tantric texts, each of the texts will, these are like sadhana manuals. They don't go into, unlike the Puranas, the tantras don't start with the history of the universe and the history of the gods and all that. No, they will start with what is the definition of a guru, what is the definition of a shishya, what is the ritual of initiation that is important, and after that, how to worship the deity exactly. And finally, it comes to what is called the prayogas. Prayoga means if you have power, how do you know that you have power? Unless you apply it, you don't know. I mean, in your mind, you can think that I'm very powerful and I'm this and that, but who cares? Unless the application of it happens, you have no idea what you have achieved or you have not achieved. This and in this whole process, where does the goddess come in? The goddess comes in, who is the main, various forms of the goddess, is that if somebody is able to apply the power on the direction of the deity who is worshipping, the form of the goddess that is worshipping, then he becomes very, very elevated, because then he is not using his own intellect and mind. He has given it up to the deity, and that itself is the sadhana. And according to the dictates of the deity, he lives his life. Then he has become a very high caliber upasak, extremely. It's like he's reached sort of the highest of the states, etc. So in this process, in the projection of power into the outside world, this is where Pashupati becomes very crucial. There are certain instances, certain rituals. Suppose somebody is a leader of a community or a king or things like that, and there are somebody, the enemies were attacking, you may have at that time, it may be necessary to give Pashupatis, because without that, the ritual will not be complete. In fact, there used to be uh, perhaps a bit anecdotal, perhaps there is some reality to this. So, there historically, one of the most intensely tantric temples, and I keep referring over and over because this is one of the original four Shaktipitas, was the Kamakhya temple. One of the reasons some people believe that for not for a very long period of time could ever the invaders conquer and capture that place. So even if they captured it, they used to lose it in quite soon enough. And there was one reference once, one of the sultans, and I'm not very good with history, so I don't remember the name. So I'd send an army of people to attack that area, that part of India, to occupy that. And they say that next day they found the horses were there and the people were not there. So something very weird and something very strange happened, which created a sense of fear in the army, and because of which, for quite a few centuries, they could not even gather an army to attack that area, because they used to think that, how can you fight something that is invisible? So there are strange occult forces which are also there protecting that area. This kind of an idea was there. So in that context, Bali was extremely important there, and it is still today, by the way. Though there are every year you'll have some of the protests going on in that area, but more or less, sir, in core Shakta Tantra Sadhana, the Vamachar system, the left-hand path, which is called, in places like Kamakhya and other places. So Bali becomes, that is where Bali is important, because it shows, it is a projection of the ritual. You're doing a ritual, you are building up a certain amount of power and energy, and that energy is then let out into the world to get certain actions done. For that, there are certain Balis that are extremely important and mandatory. Another thing is, specifically in a tantric ritual, Bali is the one part of the ritual where nothing can go wrong. There are other areas you may make a mistake in some other part of the ritual, and there is always some opportunity to rectify that part. Something you do, you make a mistake, there is some prayashchittam you can do and finish it. But in Bali, there is no prayashchittam. Bali is a one-time thing, and there's a finality to this. So that is why it's Balividhan, because it's like been mandated. So if by chance the ritual of Bali goes haywire, some mistake happens, the animal is not dead, or something or the other, some obstruction comes in the middle, something, that is then taken as a will of the deity that your worship has not been accepted. And then there will be negative repercussions to the upasaka. So Bali is like that. It's like there's a finality to this process of Bali. So all in all, I would like to say that uh, mm, the objections to Bali that come from people are mostly because they don't understand the necessity and importance of Bali. Uh, and also because there is uh, we have this Abrahamic tendency that, I just need to be a devotee. I've myself heard this very interesting statement. Very often it comes up from people, especially when new people come to temples where Bali happens. So they say that the mother is very kind, the mother is the mother, so how can she take somebody's life? So, but you are confusing a human mother with the divine mother. These two are totally different things. A human mother will have all sorts of good, bad flaws, just like any human being, and that's understandable. Whereas the deity, we call her the mother because we are trying to build an equation with the deity. If she accepts you as a child, then she becomes your mother, and then she's going to protect you from everything. This is why the Upasakas try to call that great, tremendous Mahashakti, that fantastic power that has created hundreds of things, that's incomprehensible with the average human mind. We call her the mother, so that we can form a tangible, humanized relationship with that power. But remember, even I mean, not even for a fraction of a second should you forget that it is not a human being at all. So that's why we have Srishti, Sthiti, Vinash, three things she can do. Human mothers cannot do Vinash and the normal, neither, you know, this comparison whole thing that, just because the term mother comes in, so therefore a mother will never be harsh. No, it's a deity. A devata is an entirely different thing. They have lived way beyond even the before the first humans came on this planet, and suppose by some unfortunate incident, if all of us were to die tomorrow, the devatas will still exist. They are for all practical purposes eternal. So their likes, their perspectives, to get to that kind of a being and make that being favorably disposed towards you, it requires a set of processes, rules, and this is where the rishis, this is the greatness of the masters and the gurus and the rishis who have given us this path. And there is no way you can tamper with this path and succeed. So those upasanas where Bali is not required, yes, you can do definitely those, no problem. But those upasanas, those areas where Bali is required, you will have to give the Bali, or either your upasana is not going to succeed, or in the case that the deity actually takes notice of your upasana, the deity will force you to give up. And you will not have a choice then. That's not even a question of debate then. Things will happen around you in such a way that you'll be forced to go ahead and give. And I've seen that happen. So that's sort of, more or less what I would like to say on Bali. And if there are questions.
Thank you, Rajarshi ji. Thank you very much for this important insights on Balividhan, and of course, there are various layers to you can understand this topic, and I can understand that some of them you cannot even share here. Okay, this is related to sadhana and all other things. And but whatever we have understood so far is that certain deities are associated with certain powers, and because those powers, if they are manifested, revealed, or worshipped in certain manners, then you need to worship them in what is vidhan or what is mandatory for them as ritualistically.
Right.
Among that component, Pashu Bali comes.
Exactly.
You can invoke other deity if you don't want to go to that path. But if you are choosing that path specifically, then you have to follow the tradition as it is mentioned.
Correct.
Okay, meanwhile, I would like to ask one question.
Yes, please.
You mentioned that the animal that is sacrificed there, we also get some higher form, maybe, or, travel to some other lokas, or maybe
yes,
he gets some utthan or some sort of liberation, whatever forms he had earlier. What is that? Like, how do you explain that? Like, you're saying that because of that ritual, limitation of that form uh, get liberated from that and goes to some higher power?
Yeah, so basically, so this is a concept that is mentioned in various, even acharyas have commented on this, including somebody like Abhinav Gupta. So he mentions, sorry, so he mentions basically, and not just that. So what happens is when, again, a correctly conducted ritual is done and a bali is given, so the deity takes that bali offering, and in that bali offering, these are very technical things in upasana. So what exactly does the deity take in the bali? There is, when you are sacrificing an animal, and there is the skin of the animal, flesh, bones, this, that, deity has no use of any of these things. It is the blood that is important. Okay, it is the rakta that is important. So there are more rituals that are done, if correctly done, when the blood is taken, or when the blood comes out after the bali is done. The blood is collected, and the specific mantras, sadhanas, etc. are done, and these offerings are given to the deity. So once the deity becomes happy and pleased by the process, so it does something good for everybody involved in it. It does something good for the upasaka. Some blessing or the other it gives to the upasaka, depending on what he or she has in his mind. To the animal, it ensures that it gets a higher rebirth, which means that it could be that the animal gets a birth as a human. It could be that the animal had lived a very, say, a miserable life, contained in a cage all its life. something like that. So it gets maybe born in an environment where it has more freedom and things like that. So something of the other it will do to the animal, which makes its next life better than what it was in the life that it has led. Equally, if the deity is happy, it will do some good to the upasaka also. So this is what the idea, general idea of Bali is. If the deity is happy with the sacrifice that is done, there is going to be certain positive benefit for everything or everybody involved in the upasana of that particular form. So this is what the essentially the people and the acharyas mean when they say that the animal goes to. In fact, even in the Vedic system also, I can't remember the exact sloka here or the text. I had read this long ago. One of the, I think I'm not sure if it was Kumarila Bhatta or one of the Vedic great, acharyas. He mentions that so the animal actually goes by the chanting of the Vedas. So this is what when the sacrifice is done in the Vedic ritual, there are Vedic hymns that are being chanted constantly. Okay, it is not just it's not a butcher shop. Do not confuse the two at all. For people from a vegetarian background, you may think that this is also cutting, that is also cutting. No, it's entirely different. Even in the tantric ritual, you take a sankalpa for it. It's a sadhana. So you can't just take an animal and slaughter it. No, you have a sankalpa for the sadhana. You come to the deity and say that I'm going to make this is offerings for you. Then there are mantra japas that has to be done. Then the kharga is to be worshipped, the animal is to be worshipped, and then the bali is to be given. In this whole process, while you are doing this, there is some amount of the mantra shakti or the Veda Patha when it is done, the Vedic mantras and the shaktis, they help to propel that soul. They make the deity happy, and the deity becomes happy, and along with the power generated through those chantings, they help to take that soul of that animal to a better condition than it was. I'm not saying liberation, by the way. Do not confuse better means कि मोक्ष मिल जाएगा. नहीं, मोक्ष तो बहुत दूर का बात होता है, but something or sort of a better life than what it
I
was
was
led.
saying liberated from that form, particular form.
Exactly, liberated from that life into a better condition. It could even be
Yes,
a human birth.
right, right.
Okay, so good evening, sir. Actually, I have two questions. Like in early society, started from this, once we started settling down, we started such rituals, especially doing such sacrifices, Pashu Bali, with burial practices. Like dead bodies के साथ भी हम sacrifice करते थे. And we have enough archaeological evidences जहाँ पे dead body के साथ भी पशु के skeleton भी मिलते हैं, है ना? So, is there any difference when we talk about a bali which we are offering to a deity and that offering which we are giving to a dead body? Is there any difference? That this is the first question, and the second question is about, is there any sort of hierarchy within animal kingdom, especially when we perform bali based on their gender and characteristics or qualities? And is it possible through this prana pratishtha or initiation, one can invoke the quality according to need of sacrifice or according to need based on our need?
So first question, if I understood this correctly, so there are, as you mentioned, archaeological evidences of dead bodies, and along with that, people find sometimes that there are animal skeletons. I do not know if that was a practice in India, whether it was there or not. I myself have not come across any specific text that speaks of this kind of, because in any case, we were mostly into cremation than burial. So, I mean, perhaps some communities among Dharmikas used to do burial possible. But I can think of one logic. While Bali to an animal, to a deity is there, Bali can also be given to other beings, by the way. It is not only a deity. There is a, between the deity, the realm of the deity, and between the human being, there are various layers of reality. Each of them are more subtle, more complicated, and, different, inhabited by different types of forces and powers. So there are certain uh, beings to whom Bali can be given. There is, that happens even in India in certain places. I will not go ahead and name those places at this moment, but yeah, that is possible. But more or less, the primary, since we are talking about Bali at a sort of the higher level thing, the primary use of Bali in Tantra Shastra is for as an offering to the forms of the Divine Mother. Different mothers, various forms of the mother who can take Bali that way. But yes, there are beings to whom Bali can be given. And the thing is that here the difference comes in at the Sankalpa level, right at the beginning. So any puja, Hindu puja, if you observe carefully, even at home, whatever it is, even the simplest Satyanarayan puja that is done at home or even any other things, it always starts with the Sankalpa. Sankalpa is basically you are stating your intent. Okay, why am I doing this puja? Who am I who is doing this puja? Which is the deity that I'm invoking? And what is the result that I want? If there's a specific manokamna that you have, you can mention. Or if not, you just mention that for the pleasure of the deity or things like that. So if you are bali, if somebody is offering a bali to an entity that is lesser than a deity but higher than a human being, and there are many, there's like a hierarchy of beings. In fact, in older Tantra sadhana, they would tell you that you cannot worship a Mahavidya directly. You have to pass through the realm of these beings, and only when you succeed in the worship of one of these, slowly, you go up, and finally you reach to the level of a Mahavidya upasana. So some of these beings can definitely take Bali, and you have to mention it in the Sankalpa that I'm giving this Bali for XYZ entity. In fact, that reminds me, there is a specific Vidhan for Bali, which is Bali Bhog. So not only a Pashu Bali, but there is something food offerings that are given as Balis. Food offerings means specific kinds of food, again, not random. So, if a general Durga Puja is happening, for example, right at the beginning, before anything else has happened, the Purohita who's sitting there, he will give. There's one step which is sort of cleansing the area where the puja is happening. So how do you cleanse it? So there are 3 levels of mantras that are invoked to cleanse. First, you tell some of the beings who are there in that space that okay, I'm going to do XYZ, so please don't disturb, and I'm doing it with the Agya of Lord Shiva and things like that, so they will not disturb. The next layer of beings, they're more sort of more adamant kind of beings. They may not listen to just a humble pleading. So there you offer a bali bhog, which means there are specific things, mashkalai bali we call it, specific ingredients which are given with a certain mantra, and then we take it and put it outside of that space, not in that space where we are doing the ritual, outside, and say, let's see, I have given you a bali, please eat those bali and be happy and don't disturb me. Third level, they say that if that also does not work, then there are certain mantras which are more aggressive, and you say that if you still come and disturb this ritual, then XYZ deity is going to cause you harm. Some things like that. So yes, bali offerings are also given to different, both Pashu Bali as well as Anukalpa Bali, or bali of certain food ingredients and things like that, to beings which are not exactly deities but higher or different or more subtle, in fact, ethereal beings, let's put it that way, those who do not have a physical body. So that, I think, answers the first question. What was the second one? I forgot.
It's hierarchy of beings.
Right.
Hierarchy of animals, if they are.
Oh, there are hierarchy of animals in Bali. Yes, there are different texts do mention different kinds of balis and different types of animals. Most common though is the goat sacrifice. Most common. There is also buffalo sacrifice that happens in some places. In fact, yeah, the hierarchy is there are certain stotras of Kali, and I will not go into the details of it right now here, but that do mention that different deities, different animals that are sacrificed in the right tithi and the month and things like that will produce a greater result if you choose this animal or that animal, etc. And the sacrifice is always mandatorily of a male animal. A female animal is never sacrificed. In fact, um, in local village areas, I've seen in Maharashtra, and I've seen videos somewhere in some parts of south also, in small village deities, grama devatas, sometimes balis are offered of chicken and things like that. Actual texts, however, are very clear that bali of a chicken is not recommended, but that's a folk practice. So I'm not, again, it's not, let's not go ahead and start preaching to them. Whatever is the practice is fine, it's going on, but there are list of animals again which are mentioned that okay, this can, you can give a bali. So in that list of animal, you will not find a chicken ever mentioned. A goat is mentioned, by the way, but it has always to be a male animal. One of the reasons why the female animal is not sacrificed is because killing the female animal is sort of killing a whole lineage. Okay, so it cannot reproduce anymore, that animal. So that is why it is one of the reasons it's completely barred, that you cannot sacrifice a female animal. You have to sacrifice, if you're doing it properly and traditionally, to sacrifice a male animal always.
Okay, Ankita, you would like to ask something? Let's unmute in case. Yes, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Rajarshi ji, for enlightening us on the topic. Actually, I do not have any question. I just wanted to thank you because this topic makes so much sense to me, being Shakta worshippers ourselves in my family. And I mean, I have visited the Tripura Sundari temple also in Tripura and Ubratara temple in Guwahati, Assam. There is
Yes.
another temple. You must have definitely heard about it. The Kasaikati Mandir in Hodia district, in Tinsukia
Okay.
district of Upper Assam.
Mm-hmm.
So you know this Kasaikati. Kasai means in Assamese raw blood, and
Okay.
Khati means somebody, the goddess who loves to feed on raw blood.
Mm-hmm.
So this temple was originally, it's a Devi temple, and it was uh, I mean, I just went there few days back before the rain started. So,
Okay.
and there are several sculptures in this temple which
Mm.
resonate so well with the Kamakhya temple.
Right.
The sculptures where the Devi is sitting, and she's
Mm.
sitting in that posture where I mean in the labor posture, like
Mm-hmm.
when a woman is
Mm.
about to give
Mm.
birth.
Mm.
And
Mm.
she's sitting in the labor posture, and she is enjoying a meal of
Mm. Mm.
rice and supposedly it's meat, and the
Mm.
prasad that is
Mm.
offered in this temple, in the
Mm.
Kasaikati temple,
Mm.
that consists of meat, goat meat, and
Right.
rice.
Mm-hmm.
So this is such an important and not just important, it's an inseparable part of
Exactly.
Shakta worship.
Mm.
And this particular temple, the Kasaikati temple, it was originally, it belonged to the Boro community of Assam.
Okay.
But now it is visited by all the Sakta sadhakas throughout
Mm.
Assam, and there were
Mm.
many people from North Bengal also, from Coach
Mm-hmm.
Bihar and Alipurduar
Right.
and places like these,
Mm.
and they had specifically come for Bali. And
Mm.
there is going to be a huge mela at this temple
Mm.
now because of the New Year, the Boro New Year, and where
Okay.
they worship Batho.
Mm-hmm.
So this temple is going to witness a huge like fair. The priest was telling. So
Mm.
I mean, whatever you were speaking, that I could relate with it so much, and it was very interesting. It was very nice.
Thank you.
That's all.
Thank you. Yeah. It's Bali is an integral part of once you start seeing it and understanding it. I mean, you'd be amazed. I've seen people who are actually perfect vegetarians in their life. They lead a completely sattvic and sadachari Vedic lifestyle. But once they entered into the field of Tantra sadhana and they went very deep and all that, when Bali was required, they would not hesitate to give a Bali. Because remember this, you do not worship as per your convenience and your likings and dislikes. You are approaching a deity. So उनको जो चीज पसंद है whatever this deity, if a deity likes one tulsi, then you have to give one tulsi. If baki 10 things, other things are not going to work. So if a deity likes a sacrifice, you have to give that sacrifice. It is his or her choice. It's like I tell people, like some people whom I guide in sadhana, I tell them that worship of a deity is like a one-sided love affair. So deity is not going to respond to you on day one. You have to keep trying for decades, and you have to keep trying and keep trying. And what exactly do? You find out that what he or she likes. You keep going and offering that. You use the mantras. You keep waiting. You have patience. Eventually, one day the deity is going to respond, and the day he or she responds, that is when your life is made. So it is exactly like that. So it never for a moment assume that okay, I like this thing, so I'm going to feed you this. I like that thing, so I'm going to give you this. उसमें तो उपासना नहीं है. You will be happy in whatever. वो तो anyway you can go out with friends and be happy also. That is not upasana. So like that.
What additional sources like books, etc., can be referred to in order to understand more about Balividhan?
Okay, so from the Shakta perspective, so there are almost every single tantra talks about Bali. There's not one tantra that will tell you like they'll give you the details of how Bali has to be done and things like that. And if nothing else, at least they will mention that okay, now offer a Bali, a very good Bali. And yeah, the other thing is that when a Bali is offered, if it's done traditionally, you have to offer the animal must not have any flaws in it. So that is also important. There are other some texts will tell you, for example, that you cannot offer an animal that is a kid. An animal that is at least grown to maturity, that kind of animal, that has no visible defects. So if the animal cannot walk properly or has some flaw in it, then that should not be offered. because idea is when you are offering to a devata, you have to offer the best possible thing that is there. So Kaligapuran, just to name a few at the top of the head, Kaligapuran, Yogini Tantra, for example, Kamakhya Tantra. There are now Kamakhya Tantra doesn't have details of Bali, but Kaligapuran definitely has a lot of details of Bali. Then there's a very famous stotra of Kali known as Karpuradi stotra that has various. That is actually not a stotra I would recommend for average people to read because you will not understand it. It is very sanketic. There are terms that are used that has different dual meanings and things like that. That is meant for the Vamachar practitioners of Kali. What it means and how it's to be interpreted and things like that. So those are those texts. Kaligapuran, definitely, it has got a lot of details of very, very specific details of how the bali has to be, like from getting the animal, making it take a bath, what mantra to be chanted, and then it details of what animal pleases what form of the mother. Okay, Kaligapuran was actually written, I think, around 9th, 10th century around the Kamakhya temple, and it mentions a lot of details, initial stage details of the goddess who resides in Kamakhya, and what are the different forms she manifests and all that, and which form, what kind of bali is to be done, what kind of mantra is to be used, and things like that. So that is one text. In the Vedic context, you'll, I think, I can't remember right now at the top of my head, but the Brahma Sutras and some of the commentators, for example, I think Kumarila Bhatta also has certain sections on Pashubali and defending Pashubali. This section that, why Pashubali? Because this idea that Pashubali is, whether it's Himsa or whether it's Ahimsa, this debate was there even in that time also. So there were, in fact, the larger number of Vedic commentators in their texts would actually go ahead and defend the Pashubali system, saying that even while vegetarianism by itself is a good lifestyle choice, and that is, they were pro all that. But when it comes to the sacrifice that is needed in a Vedic yajna, then it is to be done. It's the way it is. In fact, I think I was reading somebody had sent me a link from the one of the Shankara Mathas down south. Some of the Dharmic writings and all there. So there also the same thing was mentioned, exact the same idea that while of course nowadays Bali almost doesn't happen in any of the Vedic sampradayas anywhere. So to the best of my knowledge, there was one Bali that was done in a yajna in a Vedic yajna a few years ago, somewhere I think in Andhra or Karnataka perhaps. And after that, there's a lot of criticism from others and things like that. So kind of they did not pursue it further, which I feel is very sad because look at it this way. If you look at the statistics, meat eating in India is increasing every 5 years, 10 years. So you don't have a problem going to a 5-star restaurant and having a 10-course meal of I don't know how many animals you're eating. Sab theek hai. But when you have to offer to the deity, then you suddenly all the sensibilities come into play. That makes no sense to me. I mean, if people really want it, should quit meat eating. I mean, that's the one step you can do. I mean, that's neither. I'm not saying that you do it, but I'm saying that compared to that, stopping sacrifice in a ritual makes zero sense. I mean, it's not even a regular affair, those sacrifices. Whenever it is to be done, it is to be done. And it's not the majority part of the religion. So that way.
Okay, Pranav, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Rajarshi. It was really a nice talk. So my question, I'm from Rajasthan, and in my family, we have the tradition of Devi worship and the Rudra form of Devi, that is like Kali, and attributes are worshipped. But somehow I don't see that traditions there. Although in Rajasthan, there are like for Bhairav worship, there is tradition for Bali that's quite common. So my question is like, is it more of a, and I kind of trying to trace back it at least 2-3 generations in my family and surrounding. So is it more, the influence of the whole this modern paradigm, or is there any regionality also associated with the tradition of Bali?
This is a good question. So there is, of course, a regional aspect that is associated with Bali. What I have observed in my travels across different places in India, Bali was definitely more common in the places where formal Tantra Upasana was more common of the Kali Kula marg. So there are two margs of Shakti Upasana. One is the Kali Kula and one is the Sri Kula, where Tripura Sundari is the main deity. So Sri Kula is generally more popular in south, and Sri Kula has a lot of Dakshinachara Upasakas. Okay, even the Shankara Mathas also have links to Sri Kula, and there are many other old Dakshinachara Sampradayas. So Dakshinachara Sampradayas do not give Pashu Bali. But Kaligula was widely popular across eastern India, whether it's Orissa, Assam, Bengal, northern parts of Bihar, Nepal specifically. Those were all sort of prime locations where Kali Kula was worshipped. Kali Kula means basically Kali and related deities of that Kula. So it could be Tara, it could be Chinnamasta, these kind of deities. And there Bali was quite prominent always, to the extent that in Bengal, one of the oldest Smritikaras, one of the greatest Pandits who wrote down 28 texts, sort of I think 14th century or somewhere 15th century. And based on those texts, all Hindu worship used to be conducted. So he was one of the greatest man of encyclopedic knowledge, Raghunandan Bhatta. He mentions Durga Upasana, Durga Puja, that is the community Durga Puja. He says that how it is to be done and all that. And he mentions there that even in the various kramas of Durga Puja, there are like 3 ways in which Durga worship can be done. And he describes it, one is the Sattvic way, one is the Rajasika way, one is the Tamasika way. Tamasika is the more fierce form of Durga Upasana, which actually goes on for 16 days. Even in the so-called Sattvic way, he mentions that a bali is to be given. Even if it is a small bali and one bali, even it's a, he makes it very categorical that bali has to be given. Now, one thing that has happened, I believe, is that, especially in North India, because of various historical factors, one of the primary influence is perhaps of popular Vaishnavism. Popular Vaishnavism, by which I mean that the Vaishnavism of the Itihasas, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana Vaishnavism. So I'm not talking about the formal Vaishnavism where you take an initiation and then you do Vaishnava Upasana. But by and large, Ramayana or variants of the Ramayana, whether it's Ramcharitmanas or the other texts, and to some degree Bhakti of Krishna, songs of Krishna, etc. So these 2 factors were very primary in holding Dharma to some degree, even at the time when the North was specifically plundered by the invaders. Dharma was in the worst condition. So it is possible, I'm just guessing, and then there were many Vaishnava sects, the Ramanandis and their various kinds of sects that came up in the North. So perhaps an influence of that moved people away from the idea of bali, because Vaishnava sampradayas are very strict about not giving bali. So bali is like completely, that's off limits to Vaishnavism completely. There's no compromise they do on that aspect. So it is possible that influence of that has caused, in certain places in Devi Upasanas where they are done, for bali to be removed over time or replaced by some other sort of very tame vegetarian bali or something like that. In some cases, even that is also removed. So the interesting thing here is that remember that bali has a specific purpose in the ritual. If you're doing a vegetarian bali, again, if you're doing it properly in the current vidhan and all that, it is going to cause you certain internal benefits and all that. And if you are giving a pashu bali, that becomes important for external projection of power. So if you remove that ritual from there, then external projection of power that is generated through the Shakta ritual, when you're worshipping Durga or when you're worshipping Kali or somebody like a Chamunda, forms like that, will become much more difficult for an average person. And Bhairava Upasana, yes, Bali is there, but more or less what I've seen is that when it comes to the Grama Devata level of Bhairava Upasana, then Bali is important. Bali is given to that forms, but more than that, the one thing consistent with Bhairava Upasana is the offering of alcohol. Without that, Bhairava Upasana is never fully complete. I mean, whatever else you give. So, 2 of the Rajasthan side, the Bhairava Upasana that is more popular comes to the Nath Sampradaya Bhairava Upasana. So Nath Sampradayas also by and large do not give balis, but then they do not follow the formal, Tantric Paddhati. They follow the Sagar Paddhatis to do that, which is also fine. And then there are Bhairav systems of Bhairav Upasana that are very popular when it's centered around Ujjain, which is very exceptional. That is the Bhairav Krama, different stages of Bhairav Upasana. Bali is not so much done in there, not Pashu Bali, I'm saying. Pashu Bali is only to be done in Bhairav Krama normally when the very Ugra form of Tamasika form of Bhairava is invoked, and that is mostly for one of the Shatakarmas, sort of, when there is, suppose you are facing a life threat or something like that. For other things, there are other offerings that are given to Bhairava. But I do believe that if a it's my personal belief, various factors have led to the situation where in North India, a lot of places, Bali has been stopped, even in temples. And I believe that if there is a community that has no problem eating non-vegetarian food, then you should not have any problem offering a bali. At least I'm not saying regularly also. Once a year in Durga Ashtami, one bali is a very good thing to offer to the Divine Mother if those are the forms temple is worshipping. Because it brings a certain level of, we are living in a very aggressive world at this moment, because the kind of assaults that happen on dharma on various levels, and it's going to get more aggressive. The Raja and Tamaguna influence is going to increase in the world in the coming times. So non-Bali method of worship, well, it's better once in a while if a deity can take a Bali, then give a Bali. As simple as that.
Sir, Swami Vivekananda once said that Samrat Ashoka banned Bali Pratha and saved lives of millions of animals, and that made us weak and enslaved for thousands of years. Now, sir, what is your take on importance of Indian society banning Balividhan and consuming vegetarian food, like under the influence of Buddhism, Jainism, and other Bhakti traditions, and its connection with Indians getting conquered by foreigners?
No, my simple one-word answer to this, if you ask me. So there are two aspects we're saying. Now, I don't want to comment on Swami Vivekananda. I have deepest regards for Swamiji. He was a super powerful soul. Though I may not agree with all his statements all the time. That's a different matter. But that doesn't reduce my respect for him as a great, great personality who has brought, invigorate, infused a lot of energy into dharma and made Hindus from the placid state to a little bit more aggressive. But having said that, so eating non-veg or not eating non-veg is a personal choice, and I have no comments on that. There are other politics involved in that. I'm not going into that. That's eat whatever you feel like, so long as you stay away from things which are banned like beef and all that. That is, that has to be clear in the head. Bali, however, is a different matter. Bali is a part of a ritual, and I firmly believe that Bali, the temple, again, as I just mentioned in the last answer, as you know. So those devatas where Bali can be given, who take Bali, whether it's one of the Mahavidyas forms of Kali, or whether it's Chamunda, where it is Ugratara, where it is Durga, or the goddess Kamakhya, these kind of deities who can take Bali, you should give Bali. Because very simply put, Hindus are at a stage where whether you like it or not, whatever ideas you may hold, in coming perhaps 10 years, 15 years, or 20 years, I cannot predict the exact time, you will end up into a conflict with various other forces who have malicious and inimical ideas towards dharma. Okay, and it is just building up. It's just we are at the threshold of that kind of a thing that will happen. I do believe that in a stage where we are pressurized from various angles in these kind of stages, Bali, to those devatas who can take Bali, will give you an additional layer of protection. There is no denying it. It is not a matter of figment of imagination or anything, because this is exactly what the Balividhan was meant for, so that there is a projection of power in the outside. Come, for a moment, think of it this way. I'm speaking from a Hindu perspective, okay? So you guys, I'm sure, must have been watching news and reading news and all that, and there is a lot of controversy going on with respect to halal food and things like that. So I'm not a scholar of Islam or anything, but the little bit that I know, I was reading up on this because it's a hot topic that's going on. So basically, what they do in the halal process is that they kill the animal with that specific kind of slaughtering method. It has to be done by somebody who is a practicing Muslim, so which means that you have faith in the process. An atheist cannot do it, a non-Muslim cannot do it. And during the time of that slaughter, there is a certain Quranic ayat or verse or something like that is chanted. I don't know what it is exactly, something chanted. Look at it this way. So this is a method, I was just discussing with a friend a few days ago. This is a method that is converted, which has been implemented in their religion for so long, where basically every food, non-vegetarian food that is created is actually made into a bali. So whenever you are slaughtering an animal with a verse to a specific deity and ensuring that the person who is doing the slaughter believes in the deity, that actually acts as a sort of a bali. This is precisely, technicalities are different, structures are different, mantras all are different, but when we give a bali in the Shakta temple, we do exactly that. We are asking the deity, we are using a mantra of the deity, and with that mantra, we chant the mantra, while the animal is being bathed, we chant the mantra, on the kharga, we chant the mantra, and we do a sankalpa, and we say that this is for you, and that goes. So, I do believe that yeah, without going too deep into this, because this can go into very off topics and all, but we are entering a phase in the world where the Raja and Tamagunas will increase so high that sattvic methods of worship will not be able to contain this. You will need, there are deities, and the rishis have given us all forms of worship, all the deities. So when a Kali stands with a mundamala in her throat, on her neck, and the severed head of a ye in her hand, and that kind of a deity you give a bali, there is going to be some, whether you, doesn't matter whether you're vegetarian, non-vegetarian, wo to alag baat hai, apna personal choice hai, some positive level of protection in a world that is infested with increasing amount of raja and tamaguni violence is going to come in.
Yes.
Okay, yes, sir. Sir, I
Yeah.
have a question about Mahishasur. What is
Hmm.
your opinion on buffalo sacrifice or bali? That is first question, and the second question is about pran pratishtha. You talked about that we do certain pran pratishtha before doing this sacrifice. So,
Oh,
what is the meaning of pran pratishtha? What kind of pran pratishtha we do before doing that sacrifice?
okay. So Mahishasur Mardini is a form of Ma Durga, and if you look at it very technically, so there is a change in the mantra that happens of Goddess Durga when she becomes Mahishasur Mardini. So all the texts of mantra sadhana will tell you that this is the mantra of Mahishasur Mardini. So much of japa has to be done, and this and that. Whereas the Durga mantra again is slightly changed. So in higher level of worship, it is the mantra that determines the deity. Mantra is very, very core to the devata. Mantra is the devata, sort of. That number one thing. Number two is that my buffalo sacrifice happens in some places. So I'm not sure in what context you're asking this, but in Kamakya Temple, I've seen buffalo sacrifice happen quite often. Uh, Buffalo sacrifice is recommended in texts in certain cases when there is a certain tremendous amount of complicated problem that happens. Then, I mean, not just sacrifice, of course. First, there's a ritual and things like that, and then there is sacrifice. By the way, there is just reminds me there is an interesting thing. If a bali is if a shakta ritual is correctly done, sometimes a bali can often even be done without actually uh, immediate slaughter of the animal. Which means, suppose you can have an animal, and only thing is that it cannot be done by every upasaka. It requires somebody who has very high level uh, capacities in sadhana, was reached a very, very deep level, sort of established complete contact with the deity, sort of a siddha purusha. So in during the course of that worship, if an animal comes, a bali can be given without actually immediately killing the animal. Basically, you take a sankalpa and you, same thing. You do, you tell the deity that, okay, I'm going to give you bali, this is the so and so animal, and then you do a worship of the animal and then you let it go. And the thing that you will observe is that within a span of some days, the animal is going to die, because the deity is going to take away the prana of that animal once a bali has been done. So it is the only difference is that if you're doing a bali, you are actually immediately, there's a slaughter there, you're separating the head of the animal at that moment, or you're letting it die. I mean, we get scared of the word dying, but this whole process has to be looked at as sort of a, this is a transition from the animal spends a certain life here and then goes, there is a continuation of lifetimes that is very important to understand here. So basically, yeah, there is a process of bali that can also be done, but this only where you don't actually immediately slaughter the animal, but you do the ritual and you let the animal go, and in a few days the animal will die, because the deity is going to take away the prana of that animal. In order to replicate that, not fully exactly, because not everybody can do it, as I mentioned, it requires a high caliber of expertise. So there are, for example, in the Kamakya temple, there's a process where bali of pigeons are given, but not always through the killing of the pigeon. So they take the pigeon, they will do a small mantra on the pigeon, they will take it close to the bali ghar, they will touch it on a wall or something, and then they will let it go. And once you let it go, that is like you are making an offering to the deity that, okay, these two are yours now. Their prana belongs to you. Whatever you want to do with them, live or die, or etc. If this ritual is correctly done by somebody of very high caliber, the animal dies within a day or 2 or 3 or 4 days. And the manner of death also will give you an indication of, what kind of ritual was performed and things like that. But if an average individual dies, then it's just leaving the animal. It doesn't, it doesn't fulfill the same purpose as actually slaughtering of that animal and giving the bali. So, what was the second question was prana pratisthapana, right? So, prana pratisthapana actually is not done in the tantric method of bali. Prana pratisthapana done in the Vedic system when there is a bali to be given in a Vedic yagya sacrifice. Okay, there are certain Vedic sacrifices where bali is to be given. So there, what is done is there is a small replica of an animal made with flour and some water. Small, you can make a goat or something like that, like a toy shape, things like that. And then you do prana pratisthapana of that animal inside that. So prana pratisthapana is a key ritual in all our sadhana, where you invoke prana into, whether it's a vigraha of a deity, whether it's a yantra of a deity, whether you're doing a fire ritual. Basically, you are asking the deity to get established in that place. Uh, you are giving life force into that form. Okay, so there is a technical method of doing it, process of doing it. So and whenever there is a temple that is built, or where there's a vigraha of a devata that is there, so prana pratisthapana is, especially at home or other places, small places, prana pratisthapana is always done first. So in a way that, you are invoking the deity into that place. You're giving life force into the deity, and you're doing it through your pranas, by the way. Your own concentration power, your own, the vayus that run into within your system, you're using that to invoke life into that vigraha, or into that yantra, or whatever it may be. So in this case, such a ritual is done to invoke prana into that animal, that token animal that is built, so that it is like, then becomes as if it is a real animal, as if it is a real boat. So it is like a replica of the real thing, and then you are doing it. Then you slaughter that thing, etc. So if you look at it, it's a very roundabout, twisted way of doing things. And if you ask me, my frank opinion, I don't even know if this actually works. This is more like, I don't want to give sacrifice, but then I can't go against the shastras also. So I found a very twisted way of doing something to make myself happy, kind of system, if you ask me. I mean, I have full respect for the Vedic systems, but I do believe that when, if and when once in a while, it's not even that you have to turn a non-vegetarian. If you're vegetarian, stay that way. But if a certain Vedic ritual demands a bali, then give it to the gods, because the reciprocation that comes from the gods when a bali is given, if a god accepts a bali, if a devata accepts a bali, is unimaginable. You cannot replicate it with any other method. That's how it is.
Hello. Hi. Good evening, Rajarshi.
Hi.
Just a small question. I think in what you spoke last, I think a part of it has been answered. This question was about the person offering bali, about the karmic consequences. Does the deity, the devata, will take care of it, or just the person offering? Yeah.
So here is the thing. Very, very good question. I mean, I was wondering why this question often comes up very early in the discussion on bali. So what is the karmic consequence of this? There are two answers, if you ask me. One is that, first of all, the idea of thinking everything from the karmic point of view is, I believe, a process we imbibed from the religions which were not specifically the Arya way of thinking. This was more like Jaina and Buddha thinking, where your aim in life is finally to get out of life and attain whatever nirvana, shunya, jo bhi ho. So in order to do that, you'll have to constantly worry about what karmas are you invoking, where, everywhere. Whereas the old Aryan thinking process was not so karma centric, it was dharma centric. So you follow the dharma. In the process, if there are karmas, we'll deal with that. It is not that I first thinking what is the karma of it, and therefore I do or do not do an act. So that thinking process came in later, as in sort of, it's because of influence of Buddhism and various other things, etc. I mean, look at it this way: if you're really, really worried about karma, then in the Bhagavad Gita, the only advice that Sri Krishna should have given to Arjuna is that sab chhod ke bhago. Because if you're in a war, you'll kill people. You'll kill people means you'll have karma. You cannot escape that. But instead, what he does just the opposite. He says that this is your dharma, you follow it. You have to go ahead. You cannot stay with not working because it is in your gunas. You are a warrior. You will have to work. And then, of course, he gives the spiritual context of everything, that how it's there, and the yogas and things like that, all that is there. So, coming to the question of bali, does bali offering invoke karmic repercussion? Not more than eating non-veg food. In fact, much lesser than that. if you look at it that way. More importantly, yes, if you're giving a bali to the deity in the kshetra of the devata, in a very powerful place, the karmic consequence of it is taken care of the deity. I mean, these are things, you'd be amazed that there are so many, and I'm talking with tantric texts. Pretty much every second tantra speaks of bali. Okay, that after this ritual, now at this stage of the ritual, you have to get a good bali, and they describe that the bali has to be very good and the animal. Never once, not for a moment, over this last 2000 years of the Tantra Shastras that have come to us from the holy mouth of Lord Shiva, because Tantras are his domain. He is the Parama Guru. He's the Guru who has given the Tantras to the world. Because the Kali Yuga is like this. He says that in Vedic sadhanas will be not easy for most people. So I'm giving you the Tantric Upasanas, methods of Upasana. Never once has any Acharya, never once has any Tantra thought about writing one full paragraph of, oh, what is the karmic consequence of this? मेरे को क्या होने वाला है? I'm killing an animal. Why do you think in 2000 years nobody ever thought of it, and suddenly today people are worried what is the karmic consequence? Because the factor is that it was understood at that time. The moment you are invoking it in the kshetra of the deity, the moment you are giving to the deity, it is the deity's job. If you are not botching up the ritual, that is very important. Yeah. So Bali comes in the process of the ritual. You're doing the ritual, you're following step by step, going ahead. And when the time to give a Bali, in fact, if you don't give a Bali, that also will invoke a karmic consequence for you. Because in that case, the question comes that why even do that ritual in the first place? So it's like, I want to jump into the swimming pool, but I don't want to get wet. Ye nahi hoga. Either you don't enter the swimming pool, or you be ready ki ye hone wala hai. As a health system, mind se apna jo whatever negativities and other perceptions you have had, remove that. And mind you, always separate two things. One is that your food choices. Food choices is personal matter. I'm no comments on that. In fact, if somebody were to tell me tomorrow that I myself am omnivore. I mean, I eat non-vegetarian food. But somebody were to tell me that, okay, tomorrow I'm going to ban all non-veg food in India, I'll be still okay. But if you say that I'm going to ban Bali in the temple, that I'm not okay with. जिसको जहां पे बलि देना है, जो देवता को जो चीज चढ़ता है, जो whatever the deity likes, you have to give it to the deity, and nobody has any business interfering here. Nobody, not the secular state, not any half gyani, not this, that, etc. Shastras have given it, multiple shastras have given it. 2000 years people have followed it. Why exactly should we change now? What great revelation has come to us now कि कल की अवतार आ गया ऊपर से कि बोला कि सब बलि बंद कर दो? नहीं. So that makes no sense to me, if you ask me. So I think you should not bother too much about the karmic consequence and all that. I mean, that too is a very different road. I mean, if you are a Jain, Digambara, Svetambara, I don't know which sect it is, then even stepping on the road also there will come karmic consequences, because you'll be killing some or the other insect here and there. So you think of the dharma first. What is this? What is the dharmic perspective of doing a thing?